everyone, it's Alice, and it's that time of year again where it's time to make an autumn TBR. Now, I've done several TBRs lately, like I've done one for Cozy Mysteries and one for witch books, and these are just books I want to read in addition to that, I guess, although how on earth I'm gonna have time to read all of these books, I don't know. But I will be trying my best, as I do every time I make a TBR. And I just love reading when it's fall, so hopefully I will have loads of time to read, and I'm very excited. The books that I've picked out today are just kind of a mishmash of everything. We've got some historical fiction, some fantasy, some classics, and yeah, let's just get into it. The first one I've got today is one that I'm pretty sure I vowed to read last year, and then I didn't. But we're gonna try again. It's The Sister Who Ate Her Brothers by Jen Campbell. And I can't read this outside any season but fall. I have to read it when it's autumn because it just screams the season. And I really should just do it this year because if not, I have to wait another year. And I just need to do it. It looks so good. This is a short story collection filled with fairy tales from around the world, and they've sort of been reworked so that they more closely resemble their original grisly versions, and then they've also been reworked to have a more contemporary and inclusive take, which I think sounds very interesting. And it just seems perfect. It's also beautifully illustrated. It just looks like such a treat, and it looks like the kind of book that is just perfect to cozy up with on a dark night. I mean, just look at it. It's perfect, and I just have to read it. I also just have to mention, obviously the cover is beautiful, but I love that it has end paper that says this book belongs to, and then the back end papers are just like a creepy little thing. I love these kinds of details in books. And then it's also shiny on the outside, which you know I love. The second one I've got is a graphic novel. It is, of course, Garlic and the Witch, which is the sequel to Garlic and the Vampire, which I read last year and I absolutely loved. These books are just so cute and sweet and wholesome. This second one follows the same protagonist that we follow in the first book, our little garlic person right here, and she lives in a village of vegetable folk, and she's friends with this witch, and then there's also, I guess, what you would call a friendly neighborhood vampire. And I think in this book the story is about her going on yet another adventure that sort of challenges her anxieties because she's quite a scared little person. And I cannot explain how much I just loved the first book in the series. I remember I read it on a day where I kind of had, I think I was getting sick or something, and I read it and it really cheered me up. The color palette in here is just so autumnal as well, and I love how the characters are drawn, especially Garlic. And I just think this is going to be such a treat. Although there is a little part of me that kind of just doesn't want to read it because I don't know if there's going to be any more books in the series, but I'm going to save it for a rainy day when I really need it. Then we have got a book with the most autumnal cover. This is The Headmaster's Wife by Thomas Christopher Greene, and I've had this book for a couple of years now, and like a lot of the books that I own, I really need to read it. This is like literary fiction with a little bit of a mystery element, I think, and it's set in a school, which is one of my favorite settings. Our main character in here is the headmaster of this elite school in Vermont. And I think we meet him when he is older and he's found wandering around campus naked, and he's very confused and disoriented, and the police pick him up. And when he's talking to the police, he tells the story of his life, I think, and also, I guess, a story about his wife. It says it's a book about family and grief and love, and I have very high hopes for this. I think I maybe picked this up in part because of the cover, because the cover is doing a lot for me, but I'm hoping that I'm gonna love the book as well, obviously. Next, I have got two books by the same author. And the thing is, I definitely want to read one of these soon, but I can't quite figure out which one I want to start with. We have Gallant by V.E. Schwab and A Darker Shade of Magic, and I want to try and read one of them when it's fall, but it's hard to pick. Gallant, as far as I'm aware of, is a standalone, and we follow this woman who has grown up as an orphan. She's grown up at this school for young girls, I think, and the only thing that she has of her mother is this diary. And in the diary, it's clear that her mother is like kind of losing it throughout her diary, and it gets really bizarre. When our main character ages out of this school, though, she's invited to go to this house called Gallant. And when she gets there, it's very clear that there's something wrong with the house and something wrong with maybe the people living there. I don't really know, but I do love a good spooky, mysterious house. And it says, like, I've read something about how this main character ends up having to, like, protect the world from the master of the house. I don't really know. I feel like I haven't fully grasped what the story is about, but the main thing that makes me want to read this now is, like, the house and the mysterious part of that. And, I mean, this is fantasy, so there must be some fantastical elements, which does sound very good. A Darker Shade of Magic is the first in a trilogy, I think, or in a series, and it's set in a fantastical world where there are several parallel Londons, and our main character can travel between the parallel Londons, and officially he works as like an ambassador, but unofficially I think he's a smuggler, and of course this smuggling business gets him into trouble somehow. The setting of this just sounds amazing. Like, I can't wait to see the different Londons, and that I also think there's 4 Londons, but one of them is gone and we don't know what happened to it. That sounds very intriguing as well. And a lot of people have recommended this book to me, so I feel like I'm gonna love it. I have also read, I think, one other book by this author. It was a long time ago, but I really enjoyed it. I just want to read more of her work. It sounds like my kind of fantasy books, and I remember in the other book that I read, I really liked the characters, and characters are really important to me in stories, so definitely want to read one of these, but I don't know which one to start with. I definitely am in a little bit of like a fantasy mood because I also want to read The Lies of Lamora by Scott Lynch, and this is again a book I've had for a while, and I have really high expectations of this book, and I'm sure I'm gonna love it, which is why I'm not rushing to it. And so many people have told me that I'm gonna love this, and also whenever I ask for adventure book recommendations, which I do quite often on here because I love adventure books, this usually pops up, and it, like, people will tell me like it's not maybe exactly what you're looking for, but I think it has a lot of elements that you're gonna like, which makes me very excited. It's set on this mysterious island where I think the whole island is a city, and we follow this orphan who has banded together with these other orphans, and they're like thieves, and they call themselves the Gentlemen Bastards, and I think our main character is the leader of this group, and they get really good at what they're doing, so much so that they start stealing from some really powerful people, I think, and it gets them into trouble, of course. That sounds really, really good. I'm very excited about the setting as well. And this is a little bit of a longer book, but I feel like that's a good thing for this kind of story. It feels like the kind of story I could just get fully immersed in. Next, we've got one that I just have to mention again. It's Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman, and this is a book in the Practical Magic series, and I really want to read it this fall because this will be my 3rd year in a row where I'm reading one of these books when it's autumn, and it's just always such a treat. Now, the 2 other books are set closer to our present day time, but this is set mostly in the 1600s, I think. And a big part of the story in the other books is this curse that follows the Owens family. They are all unlucky in love. That's like what the curse is. And in this one, I think we get to see where the curse started with the first Owens witch that came to America. And I just think it sounds so good. I love historical fiction anyway, but I'm also just really excited to see like where it all began. I mentioned this in the video I did about witch books, but I am entirely convinced that I am just gonna absolutely love this book and it's gonna be my favorite out of the series. And I don't entirely know what I'm basing it on. I just have this feeling and my expectations are so high that I'm a little bit worried that I'm just gonna be super disappointed. But I do know a lot of you who have read this series say that this is really good. So I'm gonna take your word for it and hopefully it's as good as I think it is. Then we have a book with quite the title. It's The Book of Human Skin. And this is like historical fiction horror with maybe some fantasy elements. I don't really know. But the story is set in Venice in 1784. And this boy is born into this family and I think his inheritance is gonna be this like decaying palace. And he is born and he grows up and there's clearly something off about him because he's very mischievous and devious and it's not great. And it's definitely not great when his sister is born 12 years after his birth and she like threatens his inheritance, I guess, and he seeks to destroy her because of that. The setting of this sounds amazing. I love books set in this time period in Italy and I just feel like there's going to be so much potential in the story and the guy in the story sounds just horrible but very interesting. I haven't really heard a lot about this book. I don't remember where I discovered it, but I just have this feeling that I'm really gonna like it. Next, we have got a book that I've said that I'm gonna read around Halloween for maybe the past 3 years, and I still haven't. It's Halloween Party by Agatha Christie. And this is just one of those books where I can't not read it when it's October. This is a Poirot mystery, and the story starts off with this teenage girl who is at a Halloween party and she is telling and sort of like boasting about the fact that she once witnessed a murder, but then no one really believes her and because of that she storms off. And then of course later she's found dead and Poirot has to use his little gray cells to figure it out, and I'm sure it's gonna be great. It's been quite a while since I've read a Poirot mystery, but I always enjoy them and I love him as a character, so I just think this is gonna be a treat. I kind of just want to read it like a couple of days before Halloween or actually on Halloween, but I think what happens usually is that I will put it off and then when I get to that time I will just have forgotten about it. So I am really gonna try this year. Now the last 2 books that I have here are actually books that I would like to reread. I am really bad at rereading my favorite books, but whenever I do it I usually really enjoy it. Like I feel like with certain types of books you can get different things from them every time you reread them. And I just really want to reread some of my favorites. The first one that I have is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And this is like, if anyone asks me what my favorite classic is, I will very often say that it's this one. And it's just one of my favorite books. But it's been quite some time since I read this. And I really just want to read it again. What I remember the most about this is like the atmosphere. I just love the setting and the atmosphere of this book, and I especially loved reading about the monster because you get to read the story from different perspectives. The first perspective that you see is this boat captain, and then the second perspective is Dr. Frankenstein, and then the third perspective is the monster. And I especially enjoyed Dr. Frankenstein and the monster, and the monster is very interesting to read about because he's sort of like a villain, but then you see things from his perspective and you kind of understand how he ends up being like that. And it's just a very interesting book and it's super atmospheric. I also do kind of want to annotate this, but I don't usually do that, so I don't really know if I'm going to. The last one though, I am gonna annotate this time around, which I think is going to be interesting. I want to reread The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and this is like, if anyone asks me what's your favorite book, I will say that this is my favorite book. And with all book lovers, you have several favorites, but like this really is one of my all-time favorite books. I've never found another book that makes me feel the way this book makes me feel. And I've read it 2 or 3 times now, and I remember when I reread it for the second time, I was so worried that I wasn't gonna like it as much, but every time I read it again, I'm just more and more impressed. The writing in here is really just, it is indescribable. Like, I don't know what Donna Tartt does in this book, but whatever she's doing, it just works so well for me. And there are so many things that I want to underline in here. There are so many good lines. But like I mentioned, I don't think I've ever actually, I mean, I don't usually annotate, and I can't remember if I've ever done it with novels. I remember I did some annotating in school, in like school books, but that was for a different purpose. And in this one, like, if I annotate this, it will be my first, like, annotating a novel. I think what I really need to do is not overthink it and not get too caught up with aesthetics, because that is a hole that I fall into quite often. Like, it's very easy for me to do, like, I'll get caught up in, like, color coding, and I'm generally quite an organized person, and I like putting things into a system, but it's not really what I want to do with the annotation of this book. I just want to, like, underline, maybe write a couple of things in the margin, but I don't want to get too hung up on doing it pretty or, like, making it aesthetic, because that's not really what I'm trying to do. And it's also, I think it will pull me out of the story too much and I won't enjoy it as much. And the main reason I want to do it is to enjoy it. It is funny though, because if you'd asked me 5 years ago if I would ever write in one of my books, I would be mortified. Like, I don't care, I've never cared what anyone else does with their books, but I would never do it to my books. I wanted to keep my books, like, super pristine and wouldn't crack any spines, would never do anything. But now I'm just like, it doesn't really matter, and I kind of just want to do it. And I think it could be interesting to do it with this book, because it's a book I'm going to reread so many times throughout my life. I think it could be cool to have an annotated version of this book where I have, like, comments and stuff and things underlined. But yeah, I also kind of, like, I remember before I used to be like, my dad, he, like, dog ears his pages, and I remember it used to really bother me when he did that, even though it was his books. And now I'm just like, I understand why people do that. I like using bookmarks because there are a lot of pretty bookmarks, but I might end up doing it to this book at some point as well. I don't know, but it's interesting how things change with these kinds of things. I will say though, I don't think it's okay to do, like, crack spines or, like, dog ear pages for books that are not yours. If someone borrowed a book from me and did it, I would probably not like it very much, but with your own books, you should just do whatever you want. I do wonder what kind of pen I should use for this though, because I think I would like a black pen, but it needs to not bleed through, and these pages are relatively thin, so I need to find something that doesn't bleed through. I guess I'll have to go pen hunting, which for some reason to me sounds like a great time. Those are all the books in my stack today though. Now do tell me what books are on your autumn TBR. I would love to hear about it. And I guess also, if any of you annotate books, I would love to hear how you do it and, like, what you like about it, and if you feel like it adds something to the book the next time you read it. Or I just think it could be interesting to hear a little bit about what other people do with that and how they do it. As always though, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!